get started. All right, so this session is Elm Show and Tell. For anyone that has, if you've got a project you want to show off, or learning resource, some story about Elm, maybe a talk that you saw that you found interesting, or why you got into Elm, feel free to come up and share. I think the idea is that we would have like a show and tell where we can show off different projects, and then if we have time after that, we can just sort of sit together and hack on something. So yeah, like I could definitely use the help on all the stuff I've been working on. So I'm always looking for an excuse to bring that to one of the Elm meetups and just have us all hack together on it. Some of the cool announcements for this month. I noticed that Evan and Richard actually liked and retweeted our Elm meetup, which I was like, holy shit, I never thought I'd see the day where anyone would find out that we even exist. But yeah, like they were posting about how their meetups in San Francisco shifted from presentations to hack nights, and I said the same thing. Like after a year of running this meetup, we did the same thing, and they retweeted that. And I also was encouraging people. I think there's like Elm Detroit or a couple other meetups that people were like, well, yeah, I'm not sure if anyone's gonna come if I organize a meetup. And I was like, honestly, just go for it. Like it's been awesome. Like we've been around for a year, and yeah, we've had attendance go up and down, but it's been like the same core group of people, and it's been really cool to see. Some other announcements, there's a Haskell course starting as of today. I waited months for it to start, but yeah, if you're interested in Haskell, it's futurelearn.com, and it starts today, and it's free, so there's probably videos and lectures and stuff. I don't know how much time I'll have with the baby on the way, but we'll see. And the last unfortunate announcement is that this location is no longer going to be available to us as of 2018. So yeah, AJ and I are going to be working remote, which is kind of cool because we can work from home. But yeah, this actual location, we'll have to find something as of the end of this year pretty much. So we've got September, October, November, December, and then we'll have to find something for next year. Anyway, welcome back. So yeah, in terms of show and tell stuff, does anyone have anything they want to come up and share? I mean, we've got HDMI. Okay, cool.
I can just use, I'm just gonna.
Oh, okay, cool. That works.
So I'm gonna give like a front-end Orlando talk on Elm for like people who don't know about it too much, stuff. They told me that it's gonna be there's a lot of beginners who go there, but there will also be some people who definitely have been doing front-end for a long time, so it's kind of like a wide range of types of level of people with experience doing different types of programming. So I thought, well, I can't teach them Elm in like a 30 or 40-minute talk. That's crazy. So I was thinking, what could be good for, what would I have wanted to know when I first started to kind of open my eyes? So I was thinking, well, I could show them like the power of a union type. And this kind of came out from the hack night that we had last month, where we were like, well, how could we recreate like an HTTP request? Kind of taking it from my experience with React and Redux and kind of like setting flags and doing if statements in, the JSX to display what I wanted to display. So I created this it's got 3 different branches. One would be the way you would, the way I would have done it without really kind of knowing the power of maybes or union types. And I'm setting like different flags, like checking if something is, I'm fetching something, or if I've made a request or not. And then I refactored it to a maybe. So where my
Could you pull out
repos-
and put an IDE so we can make it bigger so you can see it, or?
I think you could just do
I
command,
guess I could do that.
command plus.
I can scroll down there. So,
I'm probably blinder than this, so.
Interesting.
so instead of just setting an empty list for repos, you know, I kind of put maybe in there because, you know, what if you don't, I would have to check for if I had even made a request or not, because if I could have an empty list if I made a request and it came back with no data, right? And then kind of taking them and walking them through that and then going into like a full refactor with union types and representing repos as an external resource that would have a not requested state, a loading state, a failure, and a success. And then being able to pattern match off of that in the view at the very bottom. Sorry, this is just some of the stuff to get to show the app. Right, just pattern match it so you can't possibly show a state that's not possible to show. So without having to forget to set flags or like, you know, checking if something is actually true or not. So I was hoping that this would kind of like open their eyes, even if they can't totally get the specific details, they can at least see, wow, I can model an application so that I can never get to a state where my users are seeing something I never intended them to. So kind of opening their eyes in a way of kind of, it's, you know, I watched David's talk at React Rally from this year, and he kind of brings this idea, I think, into JavaScript in a way that I didn't even think could really even be possible, which is pretty amazing. So my point was going to be like, well, you can't really do this in JavaScript, so you have to go to Elm for this, but probably could. But it just takes, like everything else, it just takes a hell of a lot more work. So that was, that's kind of where I'm going to lead them down, you know, that path. I'm going to kind of just do more of like a high level talk. I'm going to get into like, obviously, so a little bit of the syntax and the functions so they know that, you know, why aren't there any curly braces or things like that. But then get into this kind of,
Could we see that same part of the view code for the original and the maybe?
yes.
Just curious.
All right, cool.
Just on the other branches to show us the model, but not the view.
So the original request. So it's checking for all of these ifs.
Oh.
You know, if I'm loading, if I don't have an error message, you know, if I have, you know, more than 0 and I have received my results, you know, I got to do all these checks in order to display it, right? And it's easy to forget one or two, right? And there's nothing ever to tell you that you've done it wrong. But if you model it the way you do with union types, and you have your case statement, it's going to let you know, hey, you forgot a branch. So it's not even going to compile. You know, so that I thought that would be kind of really eye-opening. Like, wow, you can actually be really, you can describe your application in a way that makes it impossible to get to these places. And I thought it was really cool too, is I heard on a podcast that someone was, you know, if you take the union type and describe an application in different states of what it is, you could actually take that to someone who doesn't do coding, but is maybe like part of like the business or operation side, and say, are we missing anything here? You know, because it's just laid out like as a list of things, you know. So they could even help you understand what you're trying to build too, without having to get into like crazy kinds of code. It's just really legible and easy to read. So yeah.
Yeah, the contrast is between this, you know, nested ifs and then
Right.
The other one, which you could just read in English.
Yeah. Exactly. It's very, very easy to just, oh yeah, loading. It's I'm fetching.
So did you have a resource that you learned about union types from?
Yeah, I read an article. Well, I saw Richard Feldman's talk on making impossible states impossible. I think I had to watch that 2 or 3 times before I really started to really kind of grasp that. And then I read an article, because I started looking up it more, and I read an article about this kind of thing. You could actually probably take an HTTP request and model it this way. You can do it with all different types of parts of your application. Like if you have drop-down menus and things like that, where you have one drop-down menu relying on another. You could model it so that you wouldn't ever get to a place where you have like cities but no states, something like that, right? So that's kind of got my mind thinking of like, how can I write this? And not only how can I write it, but how can I take them from one step to the next, so that they can see how different it would be to write an application.
It's a good part of Elm to introduce it with
Yeah.
using mini tabs.
I think so. Because it took me months to realize, and they're right there. They're part of the Elm architecture. But you just think like, oh, it's just part of what it is. It's just the magic of it, And it took me a while to kind of get into that myself and see that you can just use this in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I think one of the good examples is like the Boolean type. It's just a true
Exactly,
or false. Yeah. And I always thought like, oh, it's baked into the language somewhere. It's some hundreds of lines of true and false code. And then I'm like, oh, it's just type bool equals true or false, and that's it.
Yeah, that's one of the things in my talk that I was going to try to kind of break down, and you could take it to an extreme of an int is really a type, and it just has all these different values. It's like an infinite number of values, but it's almost like a unique type too, right? I mean, it just has all of these values. Whereas if you just describe your own, it has maybe however many you decide. But so to kind of like bridge that gap, but the Boolean one is absolutely perfect. And I'm going to do that to like introduce them to maybes also, so they can kind of grasp that idea. That's really cool. Thanks. One other thing. So as I've been like learning and listening to podcasts, and
you're on Vision's account, so feel free to star every.
and reading. Some of the terminology is just crazy. So I've been going through and kind of defining my own. So I'm like defining it and trying to do the examples in Elm. So higher order functions, I was like, well, what is a higher order function? Lambda, okay, I get what a lambda is from JavaScript and stuff. That was a term that I heard before. But pattern matching, I didn't know. So I started writing down like all these things in a place where I can access it and remember it. Because sometimes, I don't know how many times I've heard functor described, and I just, within 2 weeks, it's out of my mind. I can't remember. So that's the other thing that's special. So that's it.
It's super cool.
When is the talk?
It's Monday, here, 7 o'clock Monday. So if you guys want to come, check it out. And I will be plugging our meetup, so we will get some more people.
Do we have anyone else that wants to present?
It's more in depth or something.
Yeah, it's gonna do that. That's gonna be kind of harder.
Okay, cool. Do you want to use this laptop?
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Do you guys have experience with Elm, or is this like first glimpse of a lot of it?
This is the first glimpse.
Okay, cool.
So.
We'll come next Monday.
I do think that's one of the most interesting parts, though, is, if you had told me a year ago, tuple or, any of these words, I would have just been like, I have no idea what you're saying. And it's just a slow process of like picking them up one at a time. And yeah, it really, and then you don't remember what it was like to not have known it.
Yeah.
Oh man, this looks amazing.
So you guys familiar with Asteroids, the classic arcade game? Show you a version in Elm. The little arrow keys are so tiny on this laptop.
That's true.
So it's like the classic arcade game. It's like
So what buttons are you using
you can
to fire?
You can shoot yourself. What's that?
What buttons are you using to fire?
F and S. F for fire, S for shields.
Okay.
But I've got the.
Now I'm wishing I had presented before this because my game looks like a child made it.
No, actually, what's throwing me off is the the up and down arrows take up
Oh yeah.
one key. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, it was like a ton of fun to build a game in Elm. It's like sort of a natural game loop built in. The way you have to use the update cycle with them. And
How did you do the explosions?
So that was like another fun thing, is using random to generate asteroids and generate the little the sort of randomly could be explosions. So the explosions just start off as basically just a radial burst, and then you take that and randomize different, how fast they're moving, like what angle they're moving at, and then tweak that until you get this nice little cluster of particles.
So I totally remember playing this. I'm that old. And I
Wait, like on Windows?
no, like the arcade. How did you get the physics to look so right?
Yeah, that also has the same thing.
Just yeah. Well, I think the answer was in the question. Physics, I guess.
But how did you
But it's not stopping, it continues with this inertia
Yeah.
that's unique to this game.
that the original game had?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the original game did have, well, maybe not the. Okay, so I kind of based this on Asteroids Deluxe,
Okay.
which has the shield instead of hyperdrive necessarily. So I don't know if the original Asteroids had the inertia, but the Asteroids Deluxe, I believe the ship does have inertia like this. When you push it, you kind of slow to a stop.
I remember it being that way.
so hard to control because of it.
Right, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of slip and slide around. And,
Yeah. It's like,
you can put your this version you can put your shield on and just crash into stuff. And the shield just blips off for a moment when you crash. So if you crash too, you can't use it indefinitely, but you can keep it on until you crash into something. But yeah, then you kind of bounce off of stuff, trying to bounce into stuff.
So is this a collage or an SVG?
Oh, SVG. Yeah, it's plenty fast for this sort of more just line graphics. Didn't do anything special to optimize. Just drawing all the lines in the world that I want. It does fine for performance. Or anything. Oh, then I don't know if you're noticing each time I start the level, the asteroids are in the same position. Elm, like in JavaScript, you can just get a random number. And in Elm, they have a library that you can get randomness from, and it has to be seeded. So it's a random number generator that you have to give a seed to explicitly. And you can use the date or some other random thing. Right now I've got a seed, initial seed is hard coded in there. So and then we just get a new seed for each level, and then so the start of each level is deterministic. So the way it looks right now, every level 1 look the same when I start, level 2 would always look the same when it starts. It'll be different, but that's a neat thing for being able to test even the fact that if you have randomness in your application, it's actually deterministic. Which is neat. But that's all. I've kind of been sort of working slowly on it over I guess the past year. Actually, AJ made the first commit because we had talked about it after the Elm meeting one day.
The first empty, yeah.
And then I was just making slow progress, but it's in a playable state, so I figured I'd show you guys. And the source is on GitHub if you're curious to see what it's made of. But
Do you want to walk us through just like the basic structure of the source code?
sure. Um,
Someone had already found it apparently.
And I guess what elements of Elm were particularly advantageous as opposed to another platform, for example?
well, it's just
I mean, he was talking about union types, for example, I mean, is that?
it's just super fun. First and foremost, it's just like a lot more fun to write it, I think, in Elm. But yeah, there are some things, like I first mentioned, the sort of game loop is just like built into the update cycle of Elm, and that's nice. You don't have to like make your own clock to control the game in your own, and you've got your just the way the Elm architecture wants you to make your app with the update and the view. Like you naturally separate all your game logic in the update, and then you review all your display logic somewhere else. So it's sort of very nice for a game too. Robert was talking about union types in your model. I can show you. So this is main, and this has sort of ties. Like there's another module called level, and that like controls like the sort of gameplay part that you play. In this part, it sort of ties together like the main title screen and then like the screens that you see that say like continue or level 1, that sort of thing. So all of that is in this union type called state. So at any given one time, the game can only be in one of these states. You're either showing the main title. I don't know if you guys can see that. The main title, the thing that says Asteroids, press enter. And then so with that, we're also keeping a list of asteroids. That's all we need. The game could be in that state, or it shows the level title, which is where it says like level 1. And in that case, we've got the number of the level, like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is an int. The level itself, which is a type that is part of the level module. And then a timer, just keeping track of the time because I show that for 1 second. So you can sort of naturally, and then you're either playing the game, you've cleared the level, or you've been destroyed. And those, like if you've cleared the level or have been destroyed, there's a timer on those too, because it's just going to show those screens for a limited amount of time before moving on to the next thing. And then in the update, so here's the update function. I mentioned the random seed. So the entire model is a tuple of two things. You've got the random seed and the state, one of those states that you're in. So when you go to update one of the messages, you can see it's first cased on the message that we get. There's a start message, a no-op message at the top, an input, and a tick. So there's only a few messages, but then I case each one of those on the state, so that it makes it kind of like Robert was saying. You can control, you can ensure you're not using a message inappropriately or at the inappropriate time. Like if you press enter, that sends a start message. The only time it makes sense to respond to somebody pressing enter is at the main title or after you've been destroyed. So if you're playing the game and you press enter, it's a no-op. You just return the same state. So like things like that are very obvious. Like you read them in plain English from the code. So that's something that having union types to clearly define in English the different states your thing can be in, and then case on those makes it super readable. So I feel like the nice thing about it is just how readable I think. Maybe that's not fair of me to say, but I think it makes. Yeah, maybe it is fair because I think since I have worked on this over like 9 months, like when you go back and I don't know if you like take a break and look at your code like from a while ago, sometimes you don't remember what you were thinking when you did that. It's hard to like put yourself back in that like rebuild that house of cards in your head again and figure out where you were. But with Elm, you sort of don't have that problem as much. I find it's easier to jump right back in where you were. So, in that sense.
Did you, has it been pretty much linear, or did you get to a certain point where you're like, oh yeah, this is all wrong, and you end up just refactoring the whole thing, or?
There's plenty of refactors, but not at a point where it was like, oh, this is all wrong. More like from here, I need to pivot and move. You know, it's easy. That's another great thing.
Because the compiler can help you with that if it is a
Yeah,
lot of changes, right?
absolutely. Yeah. That's something, people laud about Elm is how great it is to like do like a big refactor. Like you said, compilers that help.
I get to show my stupid game that doesn't work.
I had a cousin who was I used to go when I was in New York, and I was younger than him. So some of the older arcade games would be on the ones that were, he was bad, he was into like Donkey Kong and stuff like that. Asteroids before that, so yes. But we would go, I was 177, I was probably 6 or 7 years old.
I feel like this is another good example of the union types, the different positions or the different controls. So what was the HTML lazy? Is that for performance?
You know, I use that in one spot, and in retrospect, I don't know if it's necessary to be honest. There's a static part of it. I actually didn't scroll down, but at the right below the screen, there's like the instructions, like which key does what, and that doesn't change. It's just static. So I just put a lazy in front of it so that it never builds that DOM again, or it never does the diffing on the DOM. It's only ever built once, but I didn't want it to bother diffing. But it'll probably just do a reference check and not diff it. So probably don't need that lazy. But that's the only thing that we use.
Sorry, I don't mean to hijack the meetup, but that case expression takes in the message, and that's what you guys are talking about with the pattern matching is, depending on.
Yeah, case of. And then
So right here.
You can pass any
You pass any value.
there,
any expression, or either something that values.
any value to that. And then, okay,
Yeah,
and then that's a catch-all at the very end,
In this case, message has a particular type,
okay.
and it knows what the options are for it, so
Oh, since it knows what the option is, that's the left, right, thrust, fire, shield, it's gonna be one of those, that's why you don't need a drop off one.
Exactly, yeah. What's nice about the compiler is that if I left off, say, shield, and didn't have a catch-all, then it would say, hey, you left off one of the possibilities.
Okay,
And it'll tell you which one.
Yeah, so you left off shield.
and that's just a map that we're, okay.
Yeah, like that, the function you're looking at now is.
I thought there was a time signature.
Yeah, it's called initial control. Maybe that is right.
This one. Yeah, I was thinking that this is like the different options that we were looking at in that case statement.
Right, that's where the type is defined.
It's cool.
but then if you have something like key code, that just has a catch-all at the end.
Yeah.
Because it's an int. Like Robert said, there's a lot of them.
You can handle every key. That's actually something I've been struggling with, is trying to figure out how to handle multiple key presses at the same time. So are you moving the ship around and firing at the same time, or is it like you never have to touch both keys at the same exact time?
So the way I've done this is I only want to know if the key is down. So when you press it, or when it gets a message like I put the left key down, then I'm tracking. If you look for a type, actually if you go to that case statement again, you'll see there's what the one update controls. I think it's just This type called controls is just a record that's got left, right, thrust, fire, and shield, and each of those is a Boolean. So all it's doing is checking whether or not something is down at a time. And then when the on the the tick cycle and the level updates, it gets those controls and just says, okay, we're updating everything. Like everything moved a little bit, and since the last frame, everything moved a little bit. Is firing key down? If so, then maybe we need to fire. If it's been X number of X length of time since the last fire, you fire again. Fire key is down. That sort of thing. So that's how I handled it. I only needed a certain set of keys, so I just checked them up with these.
There's my next question, I apologize.
No, that's what this is.
So when I do like create React app, it gives me like a folder structure. Is there an equivalent to Elm where I can create Elm and it gives me the folder structure so I can set blinders on and just do what I have to do, or do I need to architect as I go?
It's gonna spit out a main .elm file, and it's gonna give you the Elm architecture within that.
Okay.
And the thing is, I struggled with this too, because I was like, well, what happens if I need to create another file? But it's not uncommon for files in Elm to be just enormous. And then you can kind of take things out of that and import them into one. Like a good way that I started was just taking my views, treating them as stateless functional components, just the markup, and taking those out and importing them back in. Better idea of how to, at least that's where how I started.
I got you.
There's something that amazes me about this, just sitting here playing, is the angular, like you can fire at an asteroid and hit it on the side, and if you keep firing, it'll start spinning faster and faster. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, something if you build it, or if you look in the thing that there's a folder called examples where each thing that I'm sort of testing out, I test out in isolation. So there's one where like I'm just like testing out like adding the impulse to an object. Like if you kind of like imagine like you hit a cue ball, what is that, like billiards? If you hit it dead on, it's gonna basically just move forward. If you hit it on the side, it's gonna like move a little bit to the side, but it's mostly gonna spin. You're hitting it tangential velocity basically. So there's like a file in here where I make sure I got that looking right on its own before putting it in the view. So each thing kind of add it on and test it in isolation.
I think something like that back.
Yeah?
No.
Like a game, maybe.
Well, it's in the physics department.
Yeah.
Or professor.
Like visualizing collision
But-
physics.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you have some background in physics that led you to?
No, not really. Just ways of things like Wikipedia and Khan Academy. Like most of the stuff from high school.
I remember asking AJ about it. I was like, well, I want Mario to run forward, and then when he turns the other way, he shouldn't just dart back in the direction. He should drift and then run back. And he's like, that's just called momentum. And I was like, well, I didn't go to physics school or whatever it's called. But yeah, I think that's a pretty fascinating. It's like just little keywords, we learn the word functor, and then we're like, oh, okay, well, now I know what to look up to find out how that applies.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like that inertia is tracked just by tracking its velocity and its angular velocity. So if something is moving, it's going to continue moving. If something's spinning, it's going to keep spinning at that same rate.
I think I had tweeted something while looking at your, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, this was after seeing Justin working on his project. I was like, JavaScript, just like adding semicolons, and Justin's actual commit message is update blast impact to affect angular velocity of asteroid tracking. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like what I'm working on. putting pixels here and there.
That is an actual thing.
So I think you had an interesting question about like why Elm. And one of the reasons I know that Evan Czaplicki, when he talks about moving things around the screen and dealing with layout, I remembered him saying something like, I just want to move this thing over here. And then, he'd get lost. It would become so hard that he would just convince himself, maybe I just didn't really want to do that. Like, like you just convince yourself, like, this is just hard enough to where I decided not to. So yeah, if you like wanted to ask like why Elm, a big part for me is I wouldn't get far enough with another language. I'd probably try and then give up when I got stuck. Whereas Elm is just sort of like guiding me forward, and it makes things a little easier. Like what you said about like the game loop is kind of built into the platform with the update function, or just the Elm architecture sort of has that stream of. Let's see if I can find it. The way that the Elm architecture kind of works, it just takes in the model, updates some piece of it, and then returns the new version of the model.
Or diffs, right? Those highs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
So yeah, I have a couple little things that I've been working on. One of the things we talked about previously, or I think it was in the Elm Slack or the Orlando Dev Slack, but I wanted to build like a little Feelbot kind of thing, which is just like a basic CRUD app. But the idea came to me because a lot of the developers, I've been switching from engineering into management or managing engineers, and it seems like a lot, especially with junior devs, we run into like we're bound to run into issues where we feel frustrated or unmotivated, or we just lose our excitement for whatever it is that we're working on. And I wanted like not a thing that's going to solve all your problems. Like you should probably consult a therapist in some of these situations. But yeah, I wanted something that was like a Stack Overflow for developer emotions or feelings. So like you basically just say, you'd have like if someone said like, oh, I was feeling unmotivated lately, you'd be able to click the unmotivated emoji, and then it would give you like a Stack Overflow of like a list of ideas that different people like maybe said like, well, when I'm unmotivated, I actually sign up for a new course and it tends to energize me or something along those lines. So yeah, it's basically a couple pages in the app, index of different emotions, and then like a show page where you would just indicate that, yeah, you experienced this, and then like a votable sort of thing up and down that you could propose ideas. I tried to build this in such a way that like it was easy to contribute to. If anyone wanted to build like just styles or like any little type of thing. That's been sort of like one of the things I've been working on most. Is not just starting projects, but like trying to make them easy to contribute to, or like easy to sort of reason about, or like extensible, so that if someone was like, I've been wanting to use Auth0, like I could do the authentication for this. One of the cool things about it too is the routing. This was the first time I used nested routes on something. But yeah, here it is anyway. It's live on Heroku, and it's basically just a single file. Assets. So yeah, main.elm. Very simple, like single page app, but it does have a navigation. And yeah, so this is the actual non-mockup version of it. But yeah, it's just got like a home page, a default page, and then so it's not all implemented yet, but like there would be an emoji and like a counter for like the number of users that have experienced this that you can increment. Yeah, so like little things that you could potentially vote up and down, and then go back and forth between the different ones. But yeah, the only thing that was really new to me here, most of this would be like standard, fairly easy to implement. But if you look at the navigation, I was using like slugs to route to different nested locations so that you could actually share a URL and someone could go specifically to that location. I think, yeah, there's like a place to add new fields, or it's not all implemented yet, but yeah, the idea would be that you'd have a list of users and a list of fields and essentially just be able to contribute that way.
I like the nice clean navigation.
Yeah.
Not like using IDs in the URL or something.
Oh yeah. It's actually, so that was the weird part for me. I feel like a lot of this is kind of what we're used to. So like we talked about union types and there's all the different lists of different pages. But the part that was a little off to me was figuring out how to use the nested routing. So this is just sample data. It's not actually stored anywhere or like being saved. But, so there's like a feel emoji, so it's just converting the strings to a different emoji that's related to it. So the navigation, the way it works, I was super confused about this. Every time I look at it or every time I implement it, it gets a little more obvious to me. But yeah, there's a couple times that I've used Elm routing for stuff, and every time it's gotten a little clearer. But yeah, I remember the first time just being like, I have no idea how this is kind of working. But essentially, yeah, there's different pages that we're navigating to, and they're loading view functions down towards the bottom. So we only have a limited number of pages, and then they're just loading these like view home. And it's all using Bootstrap as like the layout management. And this is stolen from GitHub's Feelbot. I don't have an actual robot that I can draw yet. So multi-line strings that I used here. Sorted, so they're sorted by name. That was kind of cool. I hadn't really done much sorting. They're supposed to be sorted by the number of times they've been experienced, so the popular ones would show up at the top. So you can sort by a certain field, and it comes default. It goes, I think, in decreasing order. No, increasing order, so you have to reverse it, and then just take the first handful. So yeah, that's what you're seeing here. These would be the more so I think if we were to pull up frustrated as an emoji, we started incrementing this. Yeah, it should start showing up here that it's incremented. And then back on this, like, so yeah, you could actually tinker with the order and everything like that. And then, yeah, the thing that I was talking about with the routing, it's just taking that as like an href, as like a link, converting it to a slug, and then down at the bottom, I think I've got a routing function. That's actually just splitting based on the slash character. And then filtering, yeah, it gets a little weird. So yeah.
Dumb question, what's a slug?
What?
What's a slug?
Oh, the slug is just like a word for, I guess like instead of using an ID, so like let's say we have this frustrated emoji, you could, most apps like Rails, you would have like app.com/fields/1, so it would be an ID based system, so you could pass like, yeah, actually I think if you do codeschool.com/users/
I see, so it's like a parameter slide you're talking about?
yeah, exactly. So like based on the URL, you would have like an interface that you could load a certain page. And in this case, we're actually using like a lowercase version of the title of the emotion or the feeling. So in this case, yeah, you could be able to do like tired, and it would just load based on that. So yeah, in Code School we use, actually apparently you could do the ID number or the username field. But yeah, so this is like the nested routing that I was talking about. I had done previously like a single slug, but then this breaks it up into a list. So you've got field/new, would also load like a new page too. So yeah, one of the cool things about Elm that I've found is like every time I do one of these little demos, it doesn't add up to much. It's not the life-changing app that I had in mind initially. But every time I do one, I learned something, and then every time I build something else after that, I have reference, like I have things that I can consult that I built that are just on GitHub, and I'm like, oh, now anytime I need to build nested routing for something, I can just use this as an example. So yeah, that's the Feelbot thing that I've been working on, and the other thing,
So do you have it, so when you click one of those links, it's just changing the URL? And then you're waiting for the URL change to update the view? Is that how your sort of flow works?
I think it's built into the navigation library, right?
But it's so when you click on, like when you build a view for that frustrated icon, like
Uh-huh.
it's just asking to change the URL. You mean like, go to hash, just like
I think it's just using like the actual href.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, just take the name, convert it to lowercase, and then append it to the actual string. So yeah, it tends to work pretty well.
That's reverse pipe.
Yeah, so there's you could pipe both directions in you could potentially, yeah, this could probably be cleaned up now that I look at it. But yeah, you could go either way. Like I'm piping one direction here and then piping the other direction here. The Elm Orlando website works similarly in that, but it's just a single level worth of routing. So the demos, resources, presentations. So yeah, that was a little bit different. The other cool thing that I've been working on for a while, and the reason that it's not quite finished is I've been trying to write like a book about working with Elixir as a backend and then Elm on the front end. And so I've been trying to use as a demo. It's supposed to be similar to like the Rails tutorial that Michael Hartle wrote, which is intended for beginners. But this would be covering Elixir and Elm. And instead of like building a Twitter clone, it's supposed to be like a game platform that you could just use Elixir on the back end to create like users and stuff like that. And then on the front end, you'd use, so this is like a single page app using Elm, but you'd also be able to create like little mini games. So yeah, like it works, a lot of it for, so like there's a couple of users that we can look through. Let's see, there's players. So I just created a couple custom players like creators of these languages. And you can sign in, the authentication works. So this part, so that's where it gets a little confusing, is that the user part of it so far is actually built with Phoenix and Elixir. So you have like an API running. So this is what sorry, I don't think you can see that. But this is /API/players. So it's just giving you a JSON response. And that's the same thing with API/games. Gives you like a sort of JSON data for the game fields. Oh yeah, and you can see slug here again, where we've got the name of like the lowercase version of the name. Another thing that slugs are usually used for is if you have like a title that has multiple words in it, you could dasherize them or something like that. So yeah, like codeschool.com/.
I'm familiar with the concept, I just hadn't heard the term before.
Oh, okay. But yeah, like an example is that our course title is named Try Elixir, but the slug is Try-Elixir. So basically the way this works is that some of it's built with Elixir and Phoenix. So like the players, this is like the list, but for the actual Elm side, we're just using the API, which has the JSON. So the homepage is just a sort of platform that lists out the games, which there's only one, and then a list of players sorted by high scores. So you can tell in the Explore History thing, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. I don't think I can zoom in. But yeah, it's just making two initial fetches. There's fetch players list, and then fetch games list, and then that's pulling it into this, which is all just like an Elm front-end application. And then we've got like the actual game that I've been working on creating is like a little sort of Mario clone. But yeah, it's basically like trying to create different states for the game too, just like Justin was saying, where there's like different levels. I essentially wanted something that had a character and an item, and the character would pursue the item and just collect different items, and then we'd go from there. But yeah, you can tell that the time loop is just incrementing. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing.
So what message is that sending?
So it's see if I can pull this up. There's an update function. Oh, this is the wrong one. So there's all sorts of different updates that I've been working with. There's a key down, key up. Time update is basically like handling a lot of the stuff that I don't know where else to put it yet. But essentially what it's doing is, yeah, just looping through. So there's subscriptions. So essentially there's gonna be a timer in the game, and it's just taking the diffs of every time time changes. But I think I would wanna do, should I be subscribing to seconds instead of diffs there? So,
The diffs comes from the animation frame library,
okay,
right? It's, if you look at the top,
Yeah.
that's where you're putting diffs from. Like, so it's synced into the browser's refresh. When it refreshes the screen, it's something called request. I'm sorry, you can request the next animation frame in JavaScript, and it will call, and you give it a callback, and then it calls your callback before it refreshes the next time. So that way you're not like, you know, if the screen is gonna refresh once every, or 60 times a second, then you should be doing work at 120 times a second, right? So that helps you key into that loop, and that's what diffs does. That's the Elm interface to that. So you're getting called, like, you know, every time the screen's about to refresh, you get the diff in terms of how long it's been since the last time it was called.
so yeah, we talked about union types and there's different game states. There's a start screen, a playing state, a success state, and a game over state. So when you press the space bar, that actually starts it, and you can move the character around. There's a timer, so 10 seconds is all you have to go around and collect all the items. The coins get incremented up here. This is like the item count, and then each coin is just worth 100 over on the score side. So yeah, you can see that once you run out of time, the game over is triggered. But yeah, essentially you can move around collecting coins, and they should spawn in new locations randomly. And then I was adding like a little bit of like a sprint or like a running, so like you can move a little faster. I'm not sure if it's rendering too well, but yeah. So if you get 10 coins, then it triggers a success state instead of a game over state. Trying to think what else is there. Oh, so the cool thing that I found out about games is that this randomness is like inherently unfun to play with. That essentially one of the reasons why game theory or why games are so fun for us to play is like the inherent learning that we do while we're, so there's like pattern recognition and like skill acquisition that we're using when we actually play a game. So like for something like this, you wouldn't want something where it's just like triggering, spawning new coins in new locations. You'd actually want something where, so yeah, like ultimately what I want to do is create levels that you can progress. So like the first level might just be super easy to like go and collect each coin, and then with each passing level, it might be like harder, or you have to like learn a new skill like a jump to actually go get the next coin, or a sprint to do it in time. So yeah, like the idea is that you would want progression from the easy skill levels to like something more difficult.
Just you have the coins always spawn in the same pattern so that you could kind of have this body memory if you play it long enough to try to get, like you're racing on a racetrack, for example.
Exactly, yeah. I think the idea is like you pick up on the pattern that the coins were in, and like maybe you wouldn't be able to complete the level the first time because you were just running about, but like maybe after that you would actually like know what the pattern of the order that they were gonna spawn in. So yeah, I was using an array for that. I was converting a list to an array, and then just storing a list of locations for the items to spawn in. But right now, yeah, this is just like random, that it's sort of spawning in a new location.
Are you actually using one of the random modules? or did you just like already put the values for now?
Yeah, I did random.generate. So it's generating a new random integer somewhere in between the start of the screen and the end of the screen basically, and then just setting the new X position for the items. But yeah, ultimately like it's all just an SVG, so like everything's sort of selectable in there. It's not like baked in. There's animation frame, keyboard, SVG, time. The model is pretty simple. It's just a character and an item, the player score. So then the big thing is once I get the game working, I'd really like to be able to send the scores to the back end, just over WebSockets. So the idea is that we'd have this player score and be able to send it back and forth from the front end and back end.